When it comes to what your family eats and drinks, you know your choices matter. You're the expert because you know what fits your life. And getting it right starts with good information. That's why America's beverage companies are sharing more information about our ingredients at goodtoknowfacts.org. No spin, no judgments, just the facts straight from the experts for more than 140 beverage ingredients. Visit goodtoknowfacts.org.
Every day, thousands of Comcast engineers and technologists like Olu Shei are working to build the best sports viewing experience.
Some of my favorite moments throughout my life are watching sports with my dad. Now I work at Comcast as part of the team that created our AI highlights technology, which uses AI to detect the major plays in a sports game.
And now, millions of sports fans will never miss a moment. Visit ComcastCorporation.com/sports to learn more.
Hey everyone, it's Mary. Before I get into it, I have a fun request for you. In an upcoming Plus segment, we are going to be talking about Halloween. Specifically, is it possible to do a topical Halloween costume this year and have it be fun? But to make this episode sing, we need you. So, tell me your favorite Halloween costume story. Tell me if you have a costume this year, what it is, why. In a world of ice raids and National Guard deployments, can you have a topical costume that is, dare I say, hilarious? You can weigh in by leaving a message on our voicemail line. That is 646-582-0091. Again, 646-582-0091. All right, here's the show. Here is something I know in my bones. No one in politics has a crystal ball. But everyone in politics is trying to convince you they do. I've been thinking about this crystal ball thing because of what's playing out in Virginia and New Jersey right now. Every few years, these states elect their governors at a moment that feels predictive. Their elections fall right in between a presidential year and a congressional midterm. For better or for worse, they are seen as bellwethers.
These off-year elections are the first real test that we can get about the mood of the electorate, how they're feeling about the White House and the state of the country.
Eva McKend is a reporter for CNN. She's been focusing on what's going on in Virginia in particular.
In Virginia, typically the electorate, but not always, votes for the opposite of the party in power that's in the White House. So this was always looking to be a good year for Democrats in Virginia, given that President Trump is in the White House.
It's interesting, though, like when I think about the bellwetherness of Virginia, I don't just think about outcomes. I don't just think about who's going to win. I also think about the process to get there. And as a bellwether, when I look at Virginia, I'm like, looks messy as hell out there.
Yes, it is emblematic of our politics. Although I guess we shouldn't be surprised that there is some sort of twist at the end of the election. Isn't that how it always goes?
The October surprise.
The October surprise.
If you haven't heard about Virginia's October surprise, it's a real doozy. Moderate Abigail Spanberger has been seen as a shoo-in for governor for months. The polling reflects that. The thing is, she's got a bunch of other people on the ticket with her. A candidate for lieutenant governor, a candidate for attorney general. This is where things get sticky.
All right, Sandra, just 3 weeks to go until Election Day 2025 in the Commonwealth of Virginia. And Jay Jones' violent texts have shaken up the contest.
Earlier this month, news broke about some truly vile text messages that were sent by Democratic Attorney General candidate Jay Jones. He jokes about killing Virginia's former Speaker of the House, among other things.
And this is the guy running for Attorney General. He's talking about putting 2 bullets in a former speaker's head. Like, are we out of our minds here? This guy needs to step out of the race.
Watch enough cable news, and you'll feel Republicans focusing in on this story, hoping these leaked texts are going to have the power to drag down the entire Democratic field. Some polling suggests that could happen. Eva warns there's an element of wish casting here.
We're all searching for these voters that feel as though they just can't support Jones in the wake of these revelations. Republicans are confident that they're there. But I mean, I've met Democrats that are so dug in. I was at a polling location in Norfolk, and a man leaves the booth. He tells me he voted for the entire Democratic ticket. And I asked him, did you have reservations about supporting Jones, given all that we've learned about these text messages that he sent? And he said, who is Jay Jones? Who are you talking about? And I said, well, if you voted for the Democratic ticket, you would have voted for him. And he said, oh, I just voted for Spanberger and everyone else on down. So I think that Democrats are relying on a little bit of that, right? Just people who are going to just go and be good Democrats and vote for the ticket.
You know, thinking about this race, I was thinking about how for Democrats, Virginia was supposed to be easy, right? Because it's a state that's been feeling the brunt of government layoffs. Abigail Spanberger, the Democratic candidate for governor, she's pretty popular. She's moderate. Her GOP opponent is not any of those things. Is this an easy race still? And I guess there's another question, which is, are there easy races now?
There aren't. You really have to leave it all on the table. Everything that you ever done, you are accountable for when you are a candidate seeking office. You might forget about text messages you sent years ago or something you posted online a decade ago. And now that is all fair game in the state of a race.
Today on the show, how a bellwether race became a big mess, and what it tells you about the new political reality all of us are operating in. I'm Mary Harris. You're listening to What Next? Stick around.
Decisions made in Washington can affect your portfolio every day. But what policy changes should investors be watching? Listen to Washington Wise, an original podcast for investors from Charles Schwab, to hear the stories making news in Washington right now. Host Mike Townsend, Charles Schwab's managing director for legislative and regulatory affairs, takes a nonpartisan look at the stories that matter most to investors, including policy initiatives for retirement savings, taxes and trade, inflation concerns, the Federal Reserve, and how regulatory developments can affect companies, sectors, and even the entire market. Mike and his guests offer their perspective on how policy changes could affect what you do with your portfolio. Download the latest episode and follow at schwab.com/WashingtonWise or wherever you listen.
This podcast is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever think about switching insurance companies to see if you could save some cash? Progressive makes it easy. Just drop in some details about yourself and see if you're eligible to save money when you bundle your home and auto policies. The process only takes minutes, and it could mean hundreds more in your pocket. Visit Progressive.com after this episode to see if you could save. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary. Not available in all states.
Tell me about the candidates for governor, Abigail Spanberger and Winsome Earl Sears. Both women, so that's historic in Virginia, but very, very different people. Tell me who they are.
Well, Abigail Spanberger is a former 3-term congresswoman. She is a former CIA operative, and she has always characterized herself as a moderate. I think there was a notable moment when there was a phone call after the midterms during the Biden administration where that leaked, and she was very, very frustrated with her party and thought that they should do more to eschew terms like defunding the police and other things that she really viewed as toxic.
Yeah, she said, I never want to use the word socialist or socialism ever again.
Right. She has long been on this train of trying to pull her party to the center. 2 years ago, she decided not to run for re-election for Congress and to really focus herself entirely on this race for governor.
And that's kind of surprising, right? Because often people will keep their congressional seat and run for something else. So she had this kind of diligent approach.
Exactly. It says everything about how she is and how serious she views this contest, that she wanted to give the party plenty of time to situate another Democrat to be successful to take over her seat. And instead, very methodically, work to capture the governor's mansion.
Okay, so that's Abigail Spanberger. Who is she running against?
She's running against Lieutenant Governor Winsome Earl Sears, who has been in Republican politics in Virginia a very long time. She is a proud Jamaican-American immigrant, and that is really core to her story. She often talks about how her story wouldn't have been possible anywhere else and has a deep affection and a patriotism for this country. She's very, very, very conservative, though. She has made comments in the past that suggests abortion is akin to genocide. She does not support gay marriage. 4 years ago, she ran ads where she had a rifle. She's not presenting that image as much 4 years later, I think because she has accurately assessed the electorate, which is not as conservative as the race that she ran 4 years ago. But I think that that's been the consistent tension. You still don't get a really clear answer from her when she talks about abortion, although actually she has evolved to a place where she says it's not about what I want, it's about what Virginians decide.
But she does accuse Abigail Spanberger of wanting to abort babies in the third trimester. She did run an ad where she was saying Abigail Spanberger was campaigning for they, them.
And if a child secretly identifies as transgender at school, she says the parents shouldn't be told. That's insane. Spanberger is for they, them, not for us.
You know, so she's clearly embracing the culture war tropes.
Yeah, they've spent a significant time and ad time messaging on leaning into this fight over trans children in Virginia public schools. And I think it's because Republicans see it as a possibility of taking away Democratic voters. But the issue is when you speak to most Virginians, they're really concerned about quality of life issues, economics, federal job cuts. And even though no doubt there are some voters that are concerned about Virginia public schools and trans children, it's not the dominant and prevailing issue. Yet it is arguably the issue that the Earl Sears campaign has spent the most time on.
Until the last few weeks, how much were the other candidates on the ballot, like candidates for attorney general and lieutenant governor, how much were they part of the gubernatorial landscape? Like, were the candidates all running together, appearing together, things like that?
They had joint appearances. I covered in both events where it was the entire Republican ticket and the Democratic ticket. But I would say that they all individually have been running their own races. Of course, in the wake of the tech scandal involving Jay Jones, Republicans are eager to call all of the Democrats running mates.
The texts in question are from 2022. In the wake of a Democratic lawmaker's death, Jay Jones was apparently bothered by the eulogies he was getting from certain GOP colleagues. So he fired off some texts to that effect to Kerry Coyner, a Republican state legislator he had served with. It seems as though Jay Jones intended to text someone else, but when he realized who he was talking to, he just kept going.
And so he says, if those guys die before me, I will go to their funerals to piss on their graves, send them out awash in something.
These are the people eulogizing his former colleague, a Democrat.
Yes. He goes on to say 3 people, 2 bullets, Gilbert, Hitler, and Pol Pot. And he's talking about Todd Gilbert, who was then the state House Speaker, a Republican.
And he says, I'd rather shoot Todd Gilbert twice and spare Hitler and Pol Pot.
Exactly. Which it seems like he was joking, referring to like a similar exchange that was from The Office.
The TV show.
The TV show. But he doubles down on it, even when Kerry Coyner says, it really bothers me when you talk about hurting people or wishing death on them. And then he even goes on to call her to try to want to further explain himself. After they get off the phone, he doubles down with this very incendiary rhetoric, suggesting that if the kids of Todd and Jennifer Gilbert should die, it might be a good thing because, in his words, only when people feel pain personally do they move on policy.
Yikes.
I mean, even if this is something that he personally believes, why would he say all of this via text message?
To a Republican.
To a Republican. It boggles the mind. He goes on to say that Todd and Jennifer are breeding fascists, little fascists. So it's a surprising exchange between the two, but one that he thought was evidently going to be kept private.
This behavior kind of joins other behavior that had already been known. The Richmond Times-Dispatch had published their findings that Jay Jones had been convicted in a reckless driving case where he was going 116 miles an hour. So that all kind of combines together to really make you question this person's judgment. I also think it's notable to say that these texts were revealed in the wake of the murder of Charlie Kirk. They essentially appear at this moment where a lot of Republicans are feeling under attack. Is that fair?
That is fair. That context is important. They feel as though it's a pile-on and that Democrats are creating an environment that makes them unsafe in this country. But I think also important context is that Jones is a known entity in Virginia. And so why we haven't seen a single Democratic official in the state of Virginia call for him to step down, drop out of the race, is because they have known him for a really long time, for decades, since he was a child. His father was a longtime lawmaker and then a judge in the state. And they say that this is not emblematic of the person that they have long known. So that, I think, is why he's been able to get some grace here from Virginia Democrats, because he's been on the scene for many, many years.
It's interesting to compare that to, say, how right-wing media jumped on this story, because if you go on Fox News, there's no way you could avoid the Jay Jones story. But I think if you're listening to NPR or watching maybe just the evening news each night, you might not know about this, right?
Some voters don't. When I went to talk to voters in Virginia, many of them say that they hadn't heard about it, or they had vaguely seen an ad, remembered seeing an ad, but they see kind of these types of ads all the time where people go after their opponents, so they didn't think much of it, and they were more concerned about other issues.
That's so interesting that there's this kind of like slurry of negative information, and voters have just become numb to it.
Exactly. And that's what Democrats are banking on. You have to be in a very specific ecosystem to constantly be hit with the Jay Jones news. And then even if you are, it's a big question if you care. That is the question, right? Voters are concerned about so many things. They might have lost their federal job or lost their federal contract. They are struggling to buy groceries. They might be concerned about the future of reproductive rights. Virginia, of course, is the only state left in the South that hasn't been impacted by the fall of Roe. And so the text messages are damning. But what I find is that Virginia voters have a lot of competing priorities that they have to think about.
But here's the thing. Abigail Spanberger, the candidate for governor in Virginia, her whole brand is based on doing things the right way, keeping it buttoned up, not embracing extreme language. So wouldn't you expect if someone down ballot from her in her race is saying something so abhorrent, she would speak out against that?
She has called the text messages abhorrent every single time that she has been asked about it. But she isn't calling for Jay Jones to drop out, because that would mean in this hour, with hundreds of thousands of Virginians that have already voted, completely ceding the race to Jason Miyares.
The Republican candidate.
The Republican candidate. And so I think that she is dealing with it personally, but she also is like taking cues from others in her party. The Virginia Democratic Party has not asked for him to step down. The Virginia Beach chapter of the Democratic Party even went a step further and said that they are 10 toes down for Jay Jones and encouraged every single Democrat in the state to continue to support him no matter what.
I mean, I've heard some progressive folks basically say the way the Democratic Party is behaving here is just right because there's not a great alternative. Jay Jones is on the ballot. Early voting has started. She would be shooting her own campaign in the foot by distancing herself, by calling for him to get off the ballot. She has distanced herself, I think you can argue, but by removing him from the ballot, it essentially hurts her. So just don't do it.
She's also likely weighing what it would mean to have an attorney general. So someone with statewide of the opposite party. Would a Jason Miyares, a second term for Jason Miyares, mean undermining her administration and what she's trying to achieve?
Yeah, I think it's worth laying out for our listeners. The Jay Jones scandal clearly is having some impact on this race. And at least some pollsters are saying the race is tight. I do think there's a world in which you see Abigail Spanberger as governor and the GOP candidate for attorney general in the attorney general slot. If that happens, what does it look like in Virginia?
I think that that's the concern from Democrats. Will he try to undermine her? Even though he has suggested in ads that you could support Spanberger and also him, he hasn't really detailed like what that would look like and how they would work in concert. But yes, it's very much, I think, operating in a universe where he is entertaining that Spanberger could win and so could he.
We'll be right back after a break. This episode is brought to you by Built. By now, you have probably heard of Built, where you can earn points on your monthly rent payment. But did you know they make it possible for you to get more outside of your home, too? By paying rent through Built, you earn flexible points that can be redeemed toward hundreds of hotels and airlines, a future rent payment, your next Lyft ride, and more. But it doesn't stop there. Built is about making your entire neighborhood more rewarding. You can dine out at your favorite local restaurants and earn additional points, get VIP treatments at certain fitness studios, and enjoy exclusive experiences just for Built members every month. Built is turning a monthly expense into an opportunity to earn rewards and discover the best that your neighborhood has to offer. Your rent is finally working for you. Earn points on rent and around your neighborhood, wherever you call home, by going to joinbuilt.com/whatnext. That's joinbilt.com/whatnext. Make sure to use our URL so they know we sent you. joinbilt.com/whatnext. This episode is brought to you by Saks Fifth Avenue. Saks makes it easy to find the perfect gifts and holiday looks that suit your personal style. The holidays can be a whole lot of things. Fun, relaxing, but also a little stressful because you've got a long list of friends and family and you gotta find a gift for everyone. If you go over to Saks.com, I guarantee it's going to jumpstart all of your ideas for what you should be getting your friends and family. It is the only website on the internet where you're going to find super high-end luxury Prada sneakers next to a crystal floral A-line gown from MacDougall. And then that's right next to a Cynthia Rowley ombre long-sleeved wetsuit. These are things I did not know existed until I went to Saks.com. And now I'm like, maybe I should be getting a bathing suit for my mom this Christmas. Maybe. Going into this holiday season, I feel confident Saks is there to help me find inspiration, curate a holiday wish list, pick out gifts for my loved ones, and have a look ready whatever might come my way. Whether it's an office holiday party, a cozy night in, or a vacation getaway, Saks has got everything you could want. If you're looking for shopping to be personalized and easy this holiday season, then head to Saks Fifth Avenue for inspiring ways to shop for everyone on your list.
The warning signs are all around us. Record-breaking temperatures, extreme floods, wildfires, and other natural disasters. Animals like polar bears and whales vanishing before our eyes. And the Trump administration is making it worse, rolling back protections and sacrificing the planet that future generations will inherit, all for corporate profits. But when people come together, they can make an impact. Backed by 3 million supporters, NRDC, the Natural Resources Defense Council, leverages the full power of the law to challenge corporations or government agencies that would illegally destroy our environment. They won nearly 90% of lawsuits they filed against the first Trump administration. Now, as their caseload grows, they need your support. Help stop oil and gas drilling in pristine wilderness, protect endangered wildlife from extinction, and safeguard our planet's climate for future generations. Make your gift today. Donate and your gift will be matched 5 times at nrdc.org/next.
In some ways, it's interesting to me that the nastiness of these text messages is getting so much attention, because this has not been a sweet and respectful race. And I think you could tell that if you look at the debate that took place between Abigail Spanberger and Winsome Earl Sears. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, perhaps it was no surprise that Earl Sears came out hot. And her campaign now wants to make this entire contest about the J. Jones text scandal. They want to try to pin Abigail Spanberger to it and say that she lacks courage, the courage needed to be governor, because she won't ask Jones to step out of the race.
But you could argue she was almost insulting. Like, she called Spanberger Abigail a whole bunch of times.
Abigail, you have nothing to say? Abigail, what if he said it about your 3 children? Is that when you would say he should get out of the race, Abigail?
And she kept interrupting her to the point where the moderators were calling her out essentially for it.
They were. And afterwards, her team said, listen, she's a Marine. This is the stakes are too high here. She had to do what she had to do. And then they're also characterizing Spanberger's looking straight at the debate moderators and not even entertaining Earl Sears. They're saying, well, that was insulting. She should have looked at her. But Spanberger conducted herself how she always does, by playing by the rules, right? The rules did not dictate getting into crosstalk and going back and forth with your opponent. It required you to answer the questions of the moderators, which Spanberger did.
Yeah. The other thing that's interesting to me about these text messages is that in the weeks since they've been released, we've seen other text messages come out, specifically with GOP operatives using racist language that's anti-Semitic, homophobic. This is this Politico reporting that we've all been following. And it just occurs to me, like, this is where we are. And there's no way, if you're voting for someone to be a major political figure, you're going to look at their text messages and they're all going to be sweet. Like, it felt so messy. And like, maybe this is where we are now. And I really didn't know what to make of that, honestly. I mean, you cover these folks. What do you make of it?
I think that this is a natural chapter of the digital age and where we are in American politics, where the past statements that you have made, even if you think that they are private and in text form, can and will likely be weaponized against you. And so I think that these are lessons for candidates. These are lessons for people who are in political office or aspire to be, that they have to be really careful what they say and who they are saying it to, because it might not be received years later. But yes, the texts reported by Politico, made by young Republicans across the country, were outrageous. I saw that Vermont's Republican governor has already asked the Vermont state lawmaker involved in the texts, in exchanging these texts to drop, to leave his state Senate seat. There have been real repercussions. And I think that actually Republicans now are giving it to Democrats and saying, listen, we are holding our folks accountable. We're asking them to step down. You aren't doing the same with one of your own.
Yeah. You know, it's not just Virginia where we're seeing a high profile election this November. There's also a gubernatorial race in New Jersey, a mayoral election in New York. And these are very different places. But I'm wondering if you think looking at them together is useful, because in both Virginia and New Jersey, there's reporting that the races are tight. And in both of those places, you have a moderate congressperson, Democrat, sort of running and trying to make the case for this statewide executive position, running against people who are openly, happy to say they're a member of Trump's GOP. Then you have a very different election in New York where you have Zohran Mamdani as the Democratic candidate running against former Governor Cuomo, someone who many people would call, quote unquote, moderate. What do all these races tell you together about where the country is heading?
Each Democrat that's running really fits the demographic of their state or their city, though. So we have more moderate candidates in Virginia and New Jersey because that speaks to the electorate in those states. And you have a Democratic Socialist in New York City because that brand of politics is ascendant in New York City. Mamdani probably could not run statewide in Virginia. But there is a clear appetite for freezing the rent and other socialist policies, right? Making buses fast and free in a place like New York. And I think for Democrats, they are realizing that they need both and, right? They can't alienate either wing of the party because Spanberger works in Virginia and Mamdani works in New York City. And they can't be at war with each other because they're all part of the same coalition.
That's interesting. Because when I looked at all this, I was seeing not so much Democrats having to prove something, but maybe moderates having to prove something. But maybe it's different. Like listening to you, I'm maybe changing my mind that all these candidates are facing stiff headwinds. You can certainly say Mamdani is facing stiff headwinds. It seems to me, though, that he didn't really expect anything else. You know what I mean? Like, as someone who's been a Democratic Socialist, he knew he was going to have to deal with the stiff headwinds. It felt a little bit to me like the Abigail Spanbergers of the world. There was a little more of a feeling from the Democratic Party like, oh, of course this will work. You know what I'm saying?
Yes, Democrats are deferential to Spanberger's style of politics. If the leadership of the party, Hakeem Jeffries, Chuck Schumer, had their way, they would run a lot more candidates like Abigail Spanberger. They feel a lot more comfortable with that lane. But listen, Spanberger will and can do things that Mamdani can't. So, for instance, during the debate, Spanberger is asked about law enforcement working with local law enforcement with ICE. And she said, yes, in some instances, she agrees with it as long as people's constitutional rights are respected. Mamdani is not going to collaborate at all, or to the extent that he can, he would block any sort of collaboration between city law enforcement and federal law enforcement for immigration reasons. But Democrats need both of these people within their party. So if it would be the desire of Schumer and Jeffries to only have Spanberger, but clearly that can't happen.
Eva, I'm so grateful for your time. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me. This was so fun.
Eva McKend is a correspondent who covers national politics for CNN. Before I head out of here, quick reminder. I am looking for your best Halloween costume stories. And I want to know if you think a topical Halloween costume is on tap for you this year. Why or why not? You can weigh in by leaving a message on our voicemail line. It's 646-582-0091. And that's the show. What Next is produced by Elena Schwartz, Rob Gunther, Anna Phillips, and Madeline Ducharme. Paige Osburn is the senior supervising producer of What Next and What Next TBD. Mia Lobel is the head of audio here at Slate. Ben Richmond is the Senior Director of Podcast Operations. And I'm Mary Harris. Go track me down on Blue Sky. Say hello. I'm at Mary Harris. Thanks for listening. I'll catch you back here next time.